The mainstream media is doing whatever they can to protect the current administration by downplaying the threat of the Russian ships and the Russian nuclear submarine that are just chilling right now miles off the coast of Florida. But if you want to better understand what's really going on in the world, you need to start listening to other media outlets from across the world as well. And you will often find that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. You know, America and the US government, the mainstream media, they're not telling the Americans the whole truth about what's going on. Russia isn't telling their people the whole truth about what's going on. But if you listen to what's being said in America and you listen to what's being said in Russia and you come to some sort of middle ground, you will be closer to the truth. Because you see right now in Russia, on the Russian news, they're already calling this World War III. They're already saying that we're in World War III right now. They've already declared America as an enemy. They've already gone so far as to say that Russia is at war with the West. This is what they're saying on their media outlets on the same week that they're sending these ships and this submarine to Cuba. Now, I've been very clear. I don't think they're sending them down here to attack us. That would be a little too obvious. But they're sending a message. And you have to understand that when tensions are this high, anything can happen. And I don't know how many of you all are aware of this, but something like this happened once before, and Russia was this close to accidentally shooting off a nuke aimed at America. It's happened before in history, and it could happen again. And as I said, the tensions are at an all-time high. These Russian warships and the submarine, it's not like they're just floating around by themselves and no one's confronting them or watching them. No. The U.S. Navy, the U.S. Coast Guard, we got Canadian military, French military, they're out here tracking them. And you never know what could happen. An honest mistake could happen. A tiny mistake that could literally bring about nuclear war within a moment's notice. And that's why I keep telling people, even though we've grown so comfortable with this conflict over there, understand that all it takes is one move for this to be taken to a whole nother level. So yeah, we can live our day-to-day life and think everything's okay, but one false move, one bad move on either side, and the ish will completely hit the fan, and we will all be covered in it. But a former KGB agent is now speaking out about the situation. Someone that's more familiar with Putin than we are. So I want to go ahead and roll this news clip. Let's listen to what he has to say, and then I'll be right back with more thoughts.
Over now to someone who has a very unique insight into the Russian mindset, maybe even the mindset of Vladimir Putin. Jack Barsky was recruited by the KGB and put into the U.S., where he spent 10 years spying for the then Soviet Union. He later left the KGB after decades of living in the U.S. under an assumed identity. He was discovered by the FBI. He is the author of the book Deep Undercover and tells his story of the speaking circuit. Jack Barsky joins us here live. Jack, it is always great to see you and speak with you. I wonder, after listening to the Pentagon there and after seeing what we saw in Cuba today, what do you think Vladimir Putin is doing here? And do you think this is serious?
Well, far be it for me to criticize somebody who should know more than I do in terms of what's going on, right? I don't have any information, so what you get from me is an educated guess that's based on what I know about Putin and what I know about Russia per se. And you know, because it's not a surprise that when I tell you that I'm an amateur historian, particularly about Russia, Russia, Ukraine, and Putin. Okay, so Vladimir Putin, right, I think is again up to his own tricks. He likes to scare people. He likes to scare the holy, you know what, out of people. And in light of the fact that he has dropped some hints about using tactical nukes and then taking it back, and then having one member of his administration make even stronger statements like that, you got to be worried about this kind of stuff. This
Right.
is not. You can't look at this as just a routine exercise. It has to be seen in the back against the background where where Putin is stating that he's actually fighting the West in Ukraine and not just Ukraine.
Do you think he's trying to send a message to President Biden? Do you think he's trying to send a message to the United States? If so, what?
Yes, everything that Putin does is sending messages, and particularly threatening messages. And if I may, what I'm concerned about here, there's a parallel in 1962. You remember the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Mm-hmm.
There was a submarine outside of the Cuban shore, and that had a nuclear-tipped missile, and that came awfully close to being launched. Okay, and that's a historically proven, and only because of the rule was all three crew members had to agree for that launch to happen, and the second in command, Vasily Arkhipov, said no, and American officials have gone on record to state that this was very, very close. And with this kind of tension that we have all over the world right now, there's always a possibility of an accidental launch.
If you have somewhat of an understanding of history, then you may have an understanding of what's going on right now. You see, for the past year or so, lines have been drawn in the sand. America, we basically know where America stands with its allies, right? We know the countries that America has ties to. We know who is our strongest allies, who are our most loyal allies. If war popped off tomorrow, we would know who's fighting on our side, right? Well, with Russia, that's not necessarily the case. So you see, over the past couple of years, lines have been drawn in the sand, and we're now starting to see that if war does break out, which it's going to, folks, it's going to. I'm going to be honest with you all. Other people might not. Everyone wants to continue playing games. War is going to happen. But right now, we're watching the lines being drawn in the sand, and we're starting to see, okay, who's really going to be against us? Who's going to be on Russia's side? Who's going to be their allies? And we've watched Russia get really close with China, which is something we should have never allowed to happen. But this current administration did. They allowed China and Russia to get way too close. We know that Russia's been buddy-buddy with North Korea. Now Russia's down here in the Caribbean, getting buddy-buddy with Cuba, Venezuela. Strategic locations, if we do get in a military conflict, these are strategic locations that will be very important to Russia because these locations are extremely close to America. So let's say war does pop off between America and Russia. You can look no further than places like Cuba and Venezuela. Those may be the battlefields that this war is fought on. I don't think it will necessarily be on American soil, at least not right away. But you will see fighting along the Caribbean. Just like when things pop off with China, you're going to see fighting in the Philippines and all of these little islands over there. But the stage is being set. Lines are being drawn. Countries all across the world are having to make a decision. Are you going to stand with the U.S. or are you going to stand with us? And there's a lot of stuff going on with world currencies, possible new currencies being introduced. A lot of countries are no longer using the U.S. dollar. I mean, it's a very complicated situation. But if you have somewhat of an understanding of history, you will know that a lot of stuff like this happened before World War II. A lot of stuff like this happened before World War I. You know, you don't just wake up one day, there's an attack, and everyone's like, oh, it's World War II, it's World War III. No. Slowly but surely, the world and places all around the world start getting into conflicts. Sometimes the conflicts have nothing to do with each other, but eventually they boil over and they start to be connected. I mean, I don't know if it's hard for you all to understand what I'm saying here, but basically, we've seen all of this before. Everything that's been happening, I've seen it before in history books. And history often repeats itself. And that's what's happening right now. It's not going to be exactly the same. Things aren't going to look exactly the same. But if you know what you're looking for, you know that the signs are there that something's going to happen. Now, if we get a new president, will things change? That's a possibility. But I don't know if this can continue until November. I think there's a possibility that we get thrusted into an even crazier situation by then. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we don't. And hopefully something can change. But if there are no major changes, right? If there are no major changes and we keep going down this path and we keep headed down this trajectory, then we are definitely headed to a massive, massive military conflict. But with that being said, let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all soon in the next one.